From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global South. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alison Lagrange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Thailand and Cambodia agreed to an unconditional ceasefire starting midnight. Malaysia's Prime Minister announces as he brokers a truce on day 5 of their fierce border conflict. The Indian Army carries out a major encounter in Jammu and Kashmir, killing 3 Al-Qaeda terrorists suspected to be behind the April 22nd Pahalgam attack that killed 26 civilians. Israel says over 120 truckloads of food have been distributed in Gaza as it announces a tactical pause in military operations amid growing global pressure to halt fighting over severe starvation in the Strip. US President Donald Trump hosts British Prime Minister Keir Starmer at his golf resort in Western Scotland, hours after announcing a new US-EU trade deal. Leaders are expected to discuss trade and the hunger crisis in Gaza. And torrential rain battering northern China triggered a deadly landslide, killing 4 people, with many still missing. The days-long deluge has forced thousands to evacuate. Hello and welcome. We begin with developments from the Democratic Republic of Congo, where a deadly attack linked to the Islamic State has killed dozens. An ISIS-linked rebel group stormed a Catholic church over the weekend as worshippers gathered for prayers. At least 43 people have been killed in the attack. Now, the attack took place in Komanda, a town in the northeastern DRC's Ituri province, ending a rare period of regional calm in the area. The attack has been claimed by the Allied Democratic Forces, or the ADF, a group that has pledged allegiance to the Islamic State. Formed in the 1990s as an anti-government rebel group in Uganda, the ADF later shifted base to eastern DRC. It formally aligned with ISIS in 2019. Driven out of Uganda by military pressure, the group now operates in Ituri and North Kivu, launching deadly cross-border attacks on civilians. In 2021, Uganda and the DRC launched a joint operation called Shuja to dislodge the ADF from its strongholds. Now, despite this, the group remains resilient. This weekend's attack is the deadliest since February, when 23 civilians were killed in a similar assault. While Ugandan and Congolese forces remained united against the ADF, Uganda's broader role in eastern DRC continues to draw criticism. Kampala stands accused of backing certain other militias to gain access to the DRC's minerals. Among those militias is the Rwanda-backed M23 rebels, who have waged a bloody insurgency in the DRC's mineral-rich east. Though a United Nations report has flagged Ugandan ties to other rebel groups, Kampala denies supporting the M23 or any other armed group. Still, many in the DRC, including lawmakers and civil society groups, accuse Kampala of undermining Congolese sovereignty. In recent weeks, Ugandan troops claimed to have DRC towns in order to prevent ethnic clashes. And in the latest, the army claims to have captured the town of Jugu, a stronghold of Kodeko, a powerful ethnic militia operating in Ituri. Now, Codeco, which originated as a farmers' cooperative, has morphed into a brutal armed group involved in ethnic violence, mainly targeting a rival community in a fight over land and resources. Uganda's capture comes shortly after its army said that it had destroyed a base belonging to another group that was responsible for the killing of dozens of school children in Uganda's west. Now, Uganda also claims to have taken control of the Congolese towns of Kasenyi and Chomia, justifying the move as preemptive measure to prevent ethnic clashes. However, these captures expand Uganda's military footprint in the DRC, raising fresh concerns about Kampala's true intentions. Is this counterterrorism or a push for regional influence and economic gain? The debate remains even as terrorist attacks continue and civilians pay the price. Now, for more on this story, we have with us Vincent Ro, the head of Political Risk for Africa, Control Risks, joining us live from London. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks for having me.
Now, Vincent, what does the recent ADF attack on the Catholic Church in Congo, which ended a months-long lull in violence, suggest about the current threat level posed by the group and its operational capacity in the northeastern parts of the DRC?
Well, the church massacre shows us that the ADF still retains enough operational reach to hit symbolic civilian targets. And I think, while over the last few months, a lot of the attention has been on M23, as you alluded to, the group still has been active. And the Congolese and Ugandan joint military operation, Shuja, has had relative success in decimating the ADF leadership and combatants, but it hasn't curbed violence against civilians. And in fact, what we tend to see often is that when military operations step up, as we've seen over the last few weeks, then the ADF also steps up its own retaliation against civilians, typically by targeting churches, but also defenseless villages. And so we are at the moment in another of these cyclical peaks in violence. There was one in January, February this year, another one in July, because fundamentally the ADF is a highly mobile group. And so it's very difficult to sustainably weaken the group and prevent this kind of attack.
Okay. And with Uganda's People's Defence Forces recently claiming the capture of a major Codeco stronghold in Ituri, what tangible impact can we expect this to have on curbing atrocities in the region, especially given the group's history of repeated ethnic killings?
So capturing a Codeco stronghold is a tactical win. It's also a PR win for the Ugandan military, but it doesn't necessarily mean the group's threat is neutralized. And why is that? Is because Codeco is not a single chain of command. It's loosely affiliated militias. Many of them are quite autonomous from each other. They're operating not necessarily with a very strong kind of umbrella command. And the history of this region shows, unfortunately, that when strongholds get captured, what it tends to do is disperse combatants, and sometimes that actually increases the threat to civilian elsewhere, because you have a bit of hit-and-run violence, or you have reprisal attacks, as we're just talking about in the case of the ADF. And so without follow-on protection plans, you're potentially just risking shifting the geography of attacks, but not really addressing the root causes of the problem if you take a military-only approach like what we're seeing now. So what you really need in these situations is not just the military win of recapturing a stronghold, but the effort that comes next to hold the territory, to invest in dialogue and in the restoration of state authority and public services in these areas.
Yes. And Vincent, given the overlapping presence of armed groups like the ADF and Codeco in Ituri province, how are regional and international peacekeeping efforts, such as the UN mission, coordinating responses to ensure the protection of civilians, particularly in places of worship and in schools?
I think the short answer is they're not really coordinating. There isn't a single unified command. You've got MONUSCO, the UN peacekeeping force. It has a footprint in Ituri, but its troop numbers have shrunk, and it's constrained in how mobile it can be, especially in quite rural or forested areas. And then you've got the Congolese army with its own coordination challenges, even internally. And then foreign forces, in particularly Uganda's UPDF, all operating in parallel. We're not talking of a proper joint, sharing or coordination of forces, and that is part of the problem, really, when we look at this crisis.
Yeah. Thank you very much for being with us on the show, Vincent.
Thank you, Alison.
Moving on, let's turn our attention to the Horn of Africa, where the Al-Shabaab is making gains in central Somalia. The Al-Shabaab terrorists have captured the key town of Maxaas in central Somalia after heavy fighting with the army and local militias. The Somali National Army confirmed the fall of Maxaas, while claiming that the forces had tactically retreated from the area. For years, Al-Shabaab has been fighting to overthrow the federal government in Somalia and to impose Islamic law. And capturing Maxaas is a big win for the terrorist group. Why? Because it is of the town's strategic importance. Maxaas is located in the central region of Hiran, about 300 kilometers north of the federal capital of Mogadishu. Now, Maxaas has been under government control for more than a decade and has served as a so-called forward operating base in offensives targeting Al-Shabaab strongholds in parts of Hiran and neighboring Galgaduud. Now, since launching an offensive earlier this year, the Al-Qaeda-linked Al-Shabaab has taken dozens of towns and villages, reversing almost all of the gains made by the government in its own military campaign in 2022 and 2023. The Somali government has relied on the support of local militias opposed to Al-Shabaab to counter the terrorist group. Along with local help, there has also been American intervention in the conflict in Somalia. Now, the United States has been routinely carrying out strikes targeting Al-Shabaab. And under President Donald Trump, these strikes have not only persisted, but also intensified. Now, according to the U.S. Africa Command, AFRICOM, the U.S. strikes on Somalia have more than doubled than last year. Now, experts suggest that one of the reasons for the major uptick in U.S. strikes in the Horn of Africa is Al-Shabaab's unprecedented counteroffensive this year. The U.S. has also been actively cracking down on ISIS terrorist network in Somalia. The latest U.S. strikes targeting Al-Shabaab and ISIS terrorist network in Somalia were conducted just last week on the 25th of July. Now, these separate strikes were conducted in close coordination of federal government Somalia as the Trump administration continues its bombing campaign in Somalia. Some experts argue that this will likely only empower the same armed groups that it claims to be fighting. And how could that be possible? Now, it's because groups like Al-Shabaab often live and operate among the civilian population. Now, this means that those fighting against Al-Shabaab can rarely differentiate between civilians and terrorists. And the result is such operations continue to kill innocent civilians, destroy properties and livestock. Terrorist groups like Al-Shabaab also capitalize on the grievances of the public and continue to spread terror. U.S. President Donald Trump has branded himself as the leader who can end wars, but experts say his bombing campaign in Somalia is seeming to only fuel the conflict further. Without investing in local legitimacy and supporting grassroots reconciliation, America's drone diplomacy could continue to backfire at the US as well as the Somali government. And our next story is about the American H-1B visa, often called the golden ticket for foreign professionals. It's a gateway to tech jobs, high salaries, and a life in the US. But now the Trump administration is planning a major overhaul of the H-1B visa system, and African professionals could be among the hardest hit. Now, the Trump administration is reportedly preparing to restructure the H-1B visa program and tighten the US citizenship test. Joseph Edlow, the new head of US Citizenship and Immigration Services, has outlined changes that align with President Donald Trump's tougher immigration stance. At the heart of these proposals is the H-1B system, long used by tech companies to hire skilled foreign talent. The H-1B is a non-immigrant visa that allows US companies to temporarily hire foreign workers in specialty occupations. It's also a dual intent visa, allowing workers to apply for a green card while in the US. Currently, 85,000 H-1B visas are annually given through a lottery system. However, it is often criticized for being abused to hire lower-cost foreign labor. The US now seeks to replace it with a wage-based model to reward higher-skilled jobs. As per the proposed changes, priority will be given to companies that offer higher wages instead of using a lottery system. The administration also plans to restore a Trump-era version of the US citizenship test, making it harder by raising the passing requirement to 12 out of 20 questions rather than the current criteria of 6 out of 10. Now, these reforms come amid rising political pressure on US immigration policies. Vice President J.D. Vance recently criticized companies for laying off American workers while hiring cheaper foreign labor through the H-1B system. But the impact of these changes may be felt well beyond America, especially in developing regions like Africa. For many African professionals, the H-1B is a key entry point into the US workforce. It offers opportunities in fields like engineering, healthcare, IT, and academia, and it provides a path to global careers and family support through remittances. But if the visa is awarded based on higher wages, those African applicants who are hired by smaller firms or for mid-level roles could be pushed to the back of the line. The system may also favor graduates from elite universities or those already educated in the US, further sidelining African candidates. If implemented, these reforms could narrow the pathway for African professionals, blocking access to global opportunities and long-term residency options. For now, these changes are still at the proposal stage, and any shift in policy would need to go through a formal rulemaking process before taking effect. But for thousands of aspiring foreign professionals, the future of the H-1B is now uncertain. And for our last story, let's move to Nigeria, where a viral video showing Nigerian miners allegedly trafficked and abandoned by a Chinese mining company has sparked outrage. The video shows distressed Nigerian miners stranded in Bambari, which is a key remote town in the Central African Republic. In the video, Nigerian miners claimed that they had been trafficked and abandoned by their Chinese employer. They were allegedly made to work without pay for nearly a year, denied food and shelter, and their passports were confiscated, and they were then left stranded. After the disturbing video went viral, the Chinese embassy in Nigeria said that it has initiated an immediate investigation into the incident. Meanwhile, the Nigerian government said that it is working to repatriate the affected miners safely through diplomatic channels. As disturbing as it is, the incident is not an isolated one. Chinese mining operations have often come under scrutiny. Human rights groups have repeatedly raised concerns over labor abuses, environmental damage, and a lack of oversight in several countries. Now, earlier this month, Ghana accused Chinese nationals of being involved in illegal gold mining, which is a serious environmental challenge for the country. However, Beijing denied the allegations. And in another incident in February, an acid spill at a Chinese-owned mine in Zambia contaminated a major river, potentially affecting millions of people. Now, despite their economic contributions, China's extensive mining operations in Zambia and neighboring countries, such as the DRC and Zimbabwe, have frequently faced criticism for environmental and labor violations. And all of this leads to growing frustration among the local communities. However, China continues to deepen its influence in Africa, while Beijing's debt diplomacy is a key driver of its influence across the continent. US President Donald Trump's Africa policy is another reason. Now, as the US continues to impose tariffs on African nations, along with massive aid cuts and visa restrictions, China is offering incentives. Last month, Beijing announced that it would expand duty-free access for all taxable products for 53 African countries that it has diplomatic ties with, which means that all of Africa except Eswatini. While Trump's America is growing more and more hostile toward the continent, Beijing has positioned itself as a consistent and committed player. And these reasons may appear sound enough for the African nations to turn toward China, but at what cost? Now that's something that Africa must evaluate. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.